Everybody. This is Leah Granger, and welcome to Curtain Call, a weekly interview series with powerful women in the arts. Curtain Call is presented by FabCollab with support from Canadian Heritage and Factor, and we bring you different guests every week, hosted by myself, Leah Granger, and my co-host, my lovely co-host, Tamar Ilana. Today on the program, I'm just going to invite a wonderful guest to join me. Today on the program, we have an incredible. Oh, wow, that was such a rapid join. You were extremely
I
technologically.
just, yeah, thank you very much. Just did what I was told.
You made it happen. Well, welcome, Alice Rich. I didn't even get a chance to rattle off your many accomplishments before you popped onto the screen.
Oh,
So we'll
well,
get into it
rattle
while you're.
away.
I will say a few things. So first of all, I've known Alice since I was I would say 14 or 15. I played basketball with her daughter all through high school. So I know you first as a fan of the Kitsilano Blue Demons. But you're much more than that.
And you are a great basketball player.
Please stop. I was not fishing. Alice is basically an amazing visual artist, a painter. But I've had the privilege of knowing you for a long time. So seeing your career really blossom and you turn into this hugely successful painter. We can see some of your paintings right behind you.
Yes.
Which is
Got a few
I
things.
love that one of the road. I was just looking at the images that you had sent me.
I'm just going to let the dog run.
Oh, here, yeah, we can see them. Well, while she's gone, I'll just tell you. Alex is the owner of Studio 13 Fine Art in Vancouver, British Columbia on Granville Island. And she's exhibited and sold her works in galleries throughout BC and her works is in numerous private and public collections across North America, including St. Paul's Hospital, might I say where I was born, the VGH and UBC Hospital Foundation in Whistler, the Office of the Premier during the 2010 Olympic Games, and so on and so on. So many wonderful accomplishments, Alex.
Thanks.
So let's just go back a little bit. Maybe we can start I don't know when is the appropriate time to start. Maybe right at the beginning. Have you always felt identified as an artist, as a sort of creative person? Was this something that you always felt was going to be your path?
I've always been involved with art, but I didn't consider myself an artist. I was too shy. But it actually started by taking history of art, of course, in high school. And that led me to following through at university. So I graduated with a history of art degree from UBC, and then I went right to work for the Vancouver Art Gallery in their outreach and extension program, which was wonderful. We'd take shows on the road to every community in BC. There was a group of about 4 of us, and we rotated shows and trails, and that's where I became an educator, because every class in each school would come through, and then we'd have evenings sessions for the adults. So that was wonderful. And then I moved to Salt Spring Island and was a hippie and had 2 children.
Wait,
and then
let's go back a bit.
Okay.
So, when you were working at the Vancouver Art Gallery, or I also took some art history classes at UBC when I was doing my degree.
Yeah.
And it's a very it's a lot of theory and you're studying a lot of artists. Did you have an art practice at that time? Were you drawing or painting or anything like that?
No, I wasn't.
Oh, right.
Really. I've always done photography, and it was actually the photography that led me into painting, because I started to do some mixed media things, and I collaborated with another artist who wanted to use my photography, and we did these huge silk screens on panels of plaster. And he said to me one day, "You just paint the background." I said, "I don't know how to paint." He said, "Sure you do." Anyway, so we did these sort of mixed media. They were fascinating. And then I started working with painting over, I printed my images on watercolor paper as a giclée, it's known as now, kind of. But in those days, it was water-soluble inks. So I painted back in, and then the photographs became very painterly. So that was exciting. And I kind of moved from there into more experimentation with mixed media using my photography and painting. And then
Was it happening like while you were working at the Vancouver Art Gallery, or was this like an evolution that was happening
this
sort of
was
like
an evolution.
alongside?
Yeah, this was very separate from the gallery. There I was really working on their exhibition program and in stuff. It's when I quit the Vancouver Art Gallery, when I got married and lived in Europe for a year, that when I came back, I started to do photography. And that's when I ended up with a greeting card company in the end. But after I left,
one doesn't really end up with a greeting card company.
No. Well, you have to do something with those photographs. And the fine art photography market was pretty slim then. It's very exciting now and has been for many years, especially in Vancouver. But what I realized is I now had to support 2 children, and I kind of have an entrepreneurial spirit. So I just put together some cards, and I thought I'd experiment and see if I published 12 cards, what that would look like. And so I did. And I went down to San Francisco to a trade show because I decided if the entire population of Canada fit into California, maybe I should just sell my cards down there. So I went to a trade show to find reps, and they really liked my work. And I had samples of 24 more. And they said, you gotta be bigger. We can't just take 12 cards. So then I realized I needed money. And this is the thing, the little lesson is you got to focus, right? So the whole way back, my mantra was, I need $5,000 and I need a place to stay in New York so I can go to the National Stationery Show. And of course, I need a babysitter for the kids, but that was Millie, who you might have met. And so I got off, my sister called me and said, I'm picking you up at the airport. I got off the plane. She said, I have somebody I want you to meet. His name is Bradley Ullman. He's a photographer in New York, and he wants you to publish his photographs as art photography in your greeting card line. I said, really? And he was a wild thing. So I talked to him. I said, well, I need $5,000 and a place to stay. And he said, no problem. So that began my career as a alternative card company, because there were 2 other women staying at his apartment in New York, and they had a greeting card company. So I learned a lot from them. They were in the show. Mm-hmm. And, you have to sometimes just hit the ground running, so you walk the show, you learn everything, you go on, and then pretty soon you're living on a line of credit, but you're also making money and supporting yourself.
Were you good at like selling yourself at those kind of events?
No, the cards sell themselves. The image.
You didn't have to do
it's just like painting. It's the painting that sells itself. Sometimes the personality and somebody meeting the artist, they're very excited. Although I learned something because I had this wonderful card called Child on the Fence, which was somebody and and people would want the story of that. And I was trying to be businesslike. So they'd say, well, who is this? And I'd say, well, it's my daughter, and that dress was an antique dress and she was never going to fit into it again. So I just let her put it on and run around. And anyway, they love little stories because they can tell their sales, their buyers that. Anyway, I learned about I learned business from the ground up. I had no idea. I'd never sat down and said, I want to start a greeting card company. It kind of just happened. So that led me into a lot of travel because I'd go and be in the show and pay all the booth fees and sell and find more reps and orders and stuff. And then when I came back, for some reason, I decided I should start a seminar series called The Entrepreneur. And there's actually books people have. I just saw one on Instagram the other day. A woman has published a book called The Entrepreneur. Because I thought, I know so much about art because I missed a step. I also graduated from Emily Carr, University of Art and Design.
Step.
I worked at the Contemporary Art Gallery.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. Okay.
Assistant curator, as an assistant director and curator. And that was when it was just still on Hamilton. I have a long career, Leah, because of course I'm up there. And so then I was working there, and after that I started the greeting card company. But with all of this gallery background, and then hitting the ground with an actual business, which was the greeting card company, I put together this seminar. And it was a 3-day seminar for artists to become more businesslike. And it was really fun. I mean, I walked through all kinds of things with them, from, learning how to approach galleries to market yourself and things.
How did you get people, how did you market that seminar?
Well, some of that was done through arts councils. They'd invite me to Kelowna or Whistler or someplace. And then I guess I decided to do it privately, and I put up an announcement at Opus or various places because we didn't really have the power of Instagram,
Granville Island.
But anyway, I always had a full class, and it was, some of those people were gallery owners that are very successful now because they wanted to know what it's like for the artists and what the artists are learning about approaching them and stuff. So, I mean, today it would be a completely different course, right? Because we have all this social media.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, so that would be a whole nother lesson.
Yeah, absolutely.
Huge.
But you're talking about all these things. You're these things just happened to me. What would because there's a lot of aspiring artists, and you've had so much sort of things didn't just happen. Is your dog there?
Yes, Ellie. She's very large and she has a very big bark. I'm hoping she doesn't.
It seems also like you were putting yourself out there all the time. Do you think that's true?
I do. I'd have to agree with that. I find that I'm quite persistent, but because I'm ambitious.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I don't know where that comes from. I think most people are ambitious. I only know a few people who aren't. And there's wonderful, gentle, kind people. Not to say that I'm not ruthless. I just, I kind of just stay open and go with the flow or something. But I do think it's coming up with an idea and just being open to it. But, it's always the kind of thing that everything that I've mentioned is a team effort, right? No artist survives alone. You have, now we have social media and stuff, but I had people signing me up from the Arts Council. I have a bookkeeper who did all that side of things. And, now I have a shipper, a framer, a studio mate, a social media person. I've really upped my Instagram. I hope everybody's going to look at it.
Everybody follow Alice.
Everybody follow Alice. She needs more followers. Um, so, it's a team. It's a team effort, right? You need a publisher. You need everybody to fall into place so that you can have it all work. I mean, if I just sold a painting yesterday to Germany, well, I've got a shipper that's gonna they take care of that, right? They know how to do the commercial invoice and how to crate and pack.
Yeah, you got a team of pros now.
Yeah.
But
So
I mean, yeah. So maybe tell me a little bit about like how you transitioned into how your like work has expanded because it's not photography anymore.
right. So when I did um, the mixed media thing, then it just led me directly into painting and using the canvas. But because of the photography, you tend to have and the history of art background, you tend to have a good eye for composition and color and, sense of fluidity. And so at that point, it could become just more of an emotional response. And
Was this like did you go to Emily Carr with like what sort of intention?
well, I went to Emily Carr and I graduated in the curatorial program.
Oh,
Yeah.
so
And then after that, I got the job as a curator, assistant director at the Contemporary Art Gallery. But
okay.
when I was at Emily Carr, I did photography and curatorship. So
Oh,
I was writing, articles about other artists. So everything I did was for other artists.
so you really held off on the painting thing.
I did. But then 9/11 happened.
Okay.
And I turned 50. And I actually had a good paying job then because I had to give up the greeting card company. I realized that I was a small alternative card company and some of them were getting bigger and bigger. And the big guys like Hallmark, they buy up space on the rack and they just pushed everybody out. So that was, the writing was on the wall one day. So I got a real job in a consulting firm doing research for them. Anyway, I really thought that was fun. But 9/11 happened and I thought, you know what? The world is coming to an end and I'm going to paint. This was what went through my head. So I hired a painting teacher and I had gotten his name from a friend, and he came because I was too shy to take workshops because I didn't want anybody seeing my inadequacy. And so I hired him, but I had already started painting. He came to my house every week and he liked what I was doing. He said, this is great. So he just stood at my elbow and said, you need this tone and that tone, mix the gray, lighten it up here, and I'd say, I don't know how to mix that tone. He said, sure you do. And I did it. And then he took me through all these great exercises. I had to do a self-portrait. I had to paint silver, like silver vessels. I had to, all these things. I said, why am I doing this? He said, because those are the things that artists fear. Doing portraiture, silver, hands, rings, everything. So I thought, I'm putty in his hands. He was just a great teacher. So that's what I did. And then that gave me the confidence to go to other workshops. And those are wonderful because you pick up so much information from other artists.
Yeah.
The person next to you uses a certain brush that they love, or this, glaze is all of a sudden, it informs their work and you get all excited. So that was great. And then
I've always found that to be very true. Like in dance as well. I would sometimes in Spain, I would go to classes like for the students, like the classes that had really advanced students, where I might not like even love the teacher, but I could just like watch them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool.
It's great. It's really great. Yeah. And it gets you going into other directions, you know, that you wouldn't think of. Anyway, there's a lot of information shared. And then sometimes you end up painting the same old way you did before, but at least you got it all background. And then I had to visualize really strongly here because I thought I've got to sell these paintings because I don't want to build up an archive, right? This is, you know,
You
the
got to move these.
spirit coming out again. And, you know, it would be nice to have an income. And I don't want to, you know, be impoverished in my old age, right? So I want to build up something. And I was a little bit of an investor, so I had been playing with that. Anyway, so.
Alice has her fingers in a lot of pots, everybody.
I know.
Taking care of business.
I know. Well, you've got to diversify, right? So I did that. I diversified. Yeah. So that's when I thought, okay, I went to visit a friend, an artist friend who had a studio on Granville Island. And he was, you know, very successful and stuff like that. And one day he called up and said, would you like to join us? And, you know, blah, 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 blah. And I'm thinking, yeah. So that's what happened. So I ended up with a studio on Granville Island called Studio 13 Fine Art.
And when was that?
I think that was 16 years ago.
Wow, I remember that.
Yeah. And that is so much fun because it's extremely active.
Yeah.
Well, you know, it's been quiet for the last few years, but it's picked up again this summer. And you've got all these people coming in from all over the world, and local travelers and Canadian travelers. And it's great. You know, you think, oh, people say, how do you paint in here with all these interruptions? And that is true. But on the other hand, they feed you too, right? Because they comment or they look and they see and they're interested or they're not. Obviously, you get them.
I'll just interrupt and say, so if for people that don't know Vancouver, Granville Island is like this market center, like this little area of like sort of like a little island full of like crafts and food and theaters and restaurants, and Alice has a gallery right in the middle of it. So it's like if you visit Vancouver, it's a place that you just go and walk around. And if you're from, like, whenever I go to Vancouver, I see you, or I see your gallery at least, because like I go for a walk there. So yeah, it's like very high traffic, like very international.
Yeah. And it's like everybody I've ever known has walked in the door at some time, and it's really fun. And you make friends too, and people buy your paintings, and things happen, right? So that's been just a wonderful experience. But I think I got there from just sort of visualizing where I wanted to be, and you don't know how it's going to happen, right? And I mean, I didn't know how I was going to get $5,000 to print 12 more cards. But you just send it out to the universe, and there it is. It's just like you and your dancing. You just construct it in your mind, and it all falls into place.
You just keep going.
Yeah.
Keep moving forward momentum. I have to say something though about your studio, and it's like an interesting thought because like as a visual artist, you don't necessarily like think of that as something with like a storefront. Or like, for example, like Tamar, who I work with, who's the artistic executive director of FabCollab. It's like, for example, like our organization is not something that would like necessarily have like a storefront. But then like if we did, Tamar, imagine how many more people we would meet. But I think you also have to be a certain type of person. I'm sure there's a lot of artists who would be like horrified at the idea of having a gallery space.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. You know, it's quite quiet in the winter, though. You can, you know, you get a lot of work done. And the other thing is when when people walk in, if you're not going to be able to paint, you frame and you do this and do that. There's lots of other stuff that artists need to do. So it's, yeah, it grows into you. I mean, I was a little tongue-tied when I was first there, thinking, wow. But you learn as you go along.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah,
So you've been supporting yourself with your art for like a long time,
yeah,
with your painting. That's amazing.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And well,
But
let's talk about
and
the
now I'm not in the studio as much because I have this wonderful studio mate. She needs this access more to the studio for work, and I have a studio on Gabriola Island,
very nice.
and so there it is. I get this whole other studio, which is incredible. If I showed it to you,
Is that where you are now?
pardon?
Are you in Gabriola now?
Yes.
Amazing.
Yeah. Did you want me to turn
Yeah,
you around and
chilling.
see it?
Chilling. I know, I've been there.
Yeah.
I slept in there once.
The dog. Oh yes. On the floor. No, we have a bed
Can
up
you
there.
tell us, like, because you have a very recognizable, like, style. There is like a thing that you do in your work. And I want to know, like, tell us about it and tell us how you got there because I think that's really interesting. Yeah, that like and important, is from what I've learned speaking with other visual artists is having this identity. So like how tell us a little bit about how you got there.
Well, I've always had kind of two series going on in my work, and one has grown out of the other. So when I started 20 years ago, it was the Passages series. And then that became Segmented Visions, which is kind of like this one behind me where I've broken down the planes of the water and what's below the water and what's above. And then the other, and that Passages series now turned into Interrupted Landscapes because Vancouver is sort of on steroids with development. So, I do these atmospheric, semi-abstract landscape, but then all I see are these hard edges. And like this one here, like the placards all over Vancouver with the lot lines for the next development, and the road going through. And
Yeah.
yeah, so that was sort of the idea. I don't know if I can get that right. So, so these geometric hard edge forms came into play, and people find them quite jarring at times. There's a lot of examples on my website, but it is all about their communications that divide our beautiful landscapes. In Vancouver, we have towers, so these squares represent, or the rectangles, the hard edges, the buildings, and they're interrupting the corridors of mountain views, and they're interrupting, many of our views. And so I'm making a statement about development and my disgust with it in a very, that's a whole topic in itself, but in a beautiful way, I'm
Yeah.
presenting a hard thought. And it's to make you think. I mean, if painting was easy, if you know what it is, you don't need to have it or look at it. But if something is jarring and tense, like that creates some tension in my work, and that tension gets you thinking. And for a long time, people say, oh, why do you put these bars in? You shouldn't put bars in. But now people really like them. Like they realize they want to think about it and they want to look. And, it's more appreciated. So, you can't do market art. You do what you do, right? And
Yeah.
one day they'll get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like, do you find that people like want to know the why, or are they just like do you also have people that see the painting and just like think it's visually interesting or beautiful? And you
Um,
think about the
a
fact
lot
that it
of
represents
people
a
think
building.
what you just said, except then they're curious enough to ask the why. So, and then they get very engaged with it, you know, because some are quite, you know, floating forms that are rectilinear, that are reflecting the atmosphere and the landscape around, right? Because the buildings aren't just there, they're also reflecting the environment.
Mhm.
They reflect the sunset, they reflect False Creek or the, you know, I mean, in Toronto, you have the same thing, right? And so that's, you know, once they hear about it, then they get it and they're much more favorable. But, and then they keep going with that thought. So it's great. And it's, you know, you can have a great conversation because people use adjectives and words that describe your work that, that's coming from them, which is, can be,
Yeah.
is really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Like how when people view like experience art, visual or otherwise, and it's like, yeah, it speaks about them and what they
Right.
say about rather than like what you might have intended.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And in my other series, The Sense of Place or Impressions of Place, they are very just open, kind of energetic or maybe more impressionistic landscapes. And those omit a lot of information because I want people to fill it in themselves. And every time you look at the painting, you know, you might see another little nuance or a couple layers of paint you didn't notice coming through before. And so that's, you know, that's another series. And that grew out of the former series, which was called Elements, which was just basically, you know, more abstract and open. Yeah. And,
Um,
yeah.
and it seems like I mean, your work is so rooted to place, like it's very much about BC, is it not? Or do you see it that way?
You know, I'd like to say I'm a West Coast artist, and I am because I live here, but you know, some people from Alberta come in and say, wow, this looks like the prairies. And I say, well, that's because I walked across Saskatchewan once.
Right. Really?
But I like horizon lines. I
Mhm.
love horizon lines. So that kind of flattens out, you know, and I don't, you know, paint many mountains and things like that. So I wouldn't, maybe it's the whole west side from Alberta on that
Sure. We'll start at like
my work.
the beginning of Alberta and go west.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But a lot of it's water, right? Because I'm always
Mm,
on a ferry going back and forth to Vancouver. And
that's
we used to
true.
sail a lot, and I still boat a lot. And so you know, water, you know, the sea is very much, I think, a strong part of my work. Influence.
So like the sort of like issue that the work is addressing, it's like this is like becomes such a like it's like your whole or a big part of your career and your creative output is focused around this sort of idea. Like, is that like one of the most like prominent issues to you, like in your life that you want to like address it in this way? Sort of this like confrontation between like the built world and the natural world.
Well, you know, I have thought about taking it that way,
Mhm.
but
Oh, okay.
I kind of feel like it's a battle I'm going to lose, right? I don't know if you've read the Vancouver plan, but boy, we've, you know, every neighborhood is going to have
They
high
do.
rises,
Yeah, I
and
know.
I'm very worried about that. And I uh, I don't know, you know, that's a campaign that I'd be open to getting involved with if somebody else was looking for some visual input for that kind of a campaign. But
But
I
it's
don't
something that
know.
you feel really strongly, obviously.
Yeah, I really do. And I also feel strongly about the history of architecture. You know, when we were at UBC, I was the School of Architecture. We all went, I wasn't at the School of Architecture, I did almost go, but we actually did a funeral march for the Burke's building when it was slated for demolition. And
Wow.
that, you may recall now, is the lovely London Drugs on the corner of Georgia and Granville. And, you know, we laid a wreath, we had readings, we had music, and there must have been 300 of us. And, you know, the whole idea was, this is the last building you're going to take down of our history. Well, that's not quite how it worked out.
No, not quite.
Yeah,
Not exactly.
that's right.
Yeah.
So, yes, but I'd like to save the funk and the history of, you know, we're a young city, so
That's
we
true.
really need to keep things that we have, doll them up. Anyway,
I have another question for you. Are there any challenges that you think you've faced in particular, like as a woman, as an entrepreneurial sort of artist woman? Like, have you faced any issues related to gender, or do you feel like you've just kind of like charged through?
I think I charged too. If I did, I don't think I notice. I find those issues more at banks, to be honest. It's like, hello, my name's on the account. Why don't you talk to me? Yeah, so but no, I mean, business is business if you're working with printers and publishers. And, you know, I think that male artists have always gotten much more recognition than women artists. And there's a wonderful show at the Vancouver Art Gallery right now. I was absorbed with it. It's called Uninvited. And it's
Okay.
Canadian women who weren't invited into the group of 7. There are some
Really?
spectacular paintings there. Yeah, it's an amazing show. I don't know.
That's interesting. The podcast
Uninvited.
I'm working on right now is doing this episode that's about like group of 7 stuff. And I
Oh,
wanted to say no about this because that would be like a
oh,
lot more interesting.
yeah. And
From you.
actually, they've published a book on the show, you know,
Okay.
that's about this thick coffee
Mm.
table book. And with all the history of these women, and they're artists as Canadians that I hadn't heard of before.
Mhm.
And oh, it's just outstanding. And
Okay,
all
well,
the text
everybody in
that they
Vancouver
have.
needs to go.
Pardon?
Everyone in Vancouver needs to check that out.
Yeah, maybe there's an online tour of it that you could see.
Probably, probably. We'll put it in the chat. Yeah, because that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Um, and what are you working on right now? Like, what's coming up for Alice Rich?
Well, I'm getting some canvases prepped. I need some new work because I've got a show coming up on Gabriola Island. We have a very, very active art community here, and an art council, and we're having the 27th year of the Thanksgiving art tour. So I have where we have open studios, and I haven't always been in it because I've been so busy at Studio 13 and stuff, but I'm in it this year and I was in it last year. And so I want new work for that show. And it's a 3-day show over the Thanksgiving weekend. And we get a lot of people coming to the island. And
Really? It's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah, yeah. And then I have a new agency that I'm working with in Alberta. And they're representing my work. So we're just getting on board for that. And they've been part of the Roxy Theater in Edmonton burnt down, but it's now been rebuilt. And they've got 4 galleries, one
Oh,
on
wow.
each level. Yeah. So I'm going to be participating in exhibition there, and
Oh,
then being
amazing.
represented by by the agency.
That's so cool. By the
Yeah.
way, somebody watching, Carol Holexa, she says that she drops into the studio whenever she's in Granville Island, and she loves the studio.
Oh,
And
good.
that was
Thank you. Thank you.
invited.
Wow. Wonderful. Good
Awesome.
feed. Thanks.
And you're still like in the studio, like people, like if people want to find your work, or like find you, I guess they can always drop if you're in Vancouver, you can just head down to Granville Island and
Yeah.
studios and
Yeah.
pop in.
Yeah. And a lot of my work is in the loft studio and it's mixed around below because it's all intermingled with Sky Fowler, my who does very pure abstract work. And so we're a part of we're the sort of main resident artists there. And we also have some guest artists now and then, and we do some pop-up shows.
Nice.
Very fun. So we share in that way with other artists.
I have another question. This is maybe my last question. Do you think that you're ever gonna retire, or is this something that you would do, like just continue to do forever?
I think I'm going to continue.
Mhm.
This is completely different, but when the pandemic hit, I started to write.
Oh.
I couldn't stop. I started writing poetry. And then I sort of wrote these short little anecdotes, stories. And I had to stop myself and go back to painting. But, you know, I just recently have wrote a couple poems, one to the First Nations and one to the summer evening. And so it's fun to keep my hand in that and just play with that. So I think I'm always, you know, the thing is, once you're involved in the art world, you're sort of always involved in some way. My whole career has been involved in some way in the arts. And I love that. People used to say, what would you do with a history of art degree? Well, I've done everything with it. There isn't one thing where I haven't drawn on that, whether it's traveling in Europe and participating in the world and interior design. And I did at one time want to be an interior designer, but I didn't get any support in that. It's one of those things where, So,
I mean, it's like you've done so many different things, but it seems like you've really found, like, to be able to have this gallery and to be a painter is such an incredible accomplishment. It's like amazingly impressive to me.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
it's kind of like, you know, you just one step at a time. You don't think about it. You just keep forging on, as you said, right?
Totally, exactly.
And art is a practice, right? Just like dance is a practice, or performance is a practice. And so we're still practicing. But, you know, it's just keeping the curiosity, because I am curious. I love looking and seeing and experimenting.
I'll leave people with the one story of Alice. Is we went to Kenya together to visit her daughter. And so it was me and Jessa, her daughter, and then our friend Katie and Jessa's husband Alex. So we were all like late 30s, and Alice,
Except for me.
Jessa's mom, who is like a little bit older, and she would like wear us out. It's like she was like talking to every person. Like we'd just be trying to get through like some place in the city, and then she'd be like having a 20-minute conversation with like whoever, the guy like selling chicken or something. Like you had more energy than anybody. Like so social. I think I'm a like outgoing. So like you, I can vouch for the fact that like you definitely are a curious, like vibrant love of life kind of gal, which I think, you know, has gotta be helpful.
Thank you so much, Leah. And you are a joy.
Well,
we had a lot of fun on that trip.
It was crazy. You got to send me the pictures. I have nothing.
Beautiful pictures of you.
Well, this has been wonderful. So if people want to find your work, they can drop by Studio 13 in Granville Island, and also, of course, follow Alice on social media. She has a lot of amazing work that's always being published there. She's really on the ball when it comes to the socials.
Yeah.
And you've got your show coming up on Gabriola. And yeah, it's just been such a
And I have
pleasure.
a very good website, which may be easier. You can see what work is available in the available gallery, and then you can see very clearly my two different styles.
Yeah, I think it'd be like it's like you need to see what
Right.
we're talking about for
Right.
sure.
And of course, you could buy prints through Etsy.
She knows what she's doing, folks. You gotta get it in there.
Oh my God. Yep. Yep. I've only sold one though.
Well, you know what? Okay.
Oh
It's building
well,
momentum.
it's all right. It's all right.
Well, thank you so
Well,
much. Oh
this
yeah,
was
we'll post the
really
website.
fun, Leah.
Alice, what's your website?
It's alice-rich.com.
I'm just gonna put it in the chat here for someone that's asking. Alex hyphen what? I'm writing hyphen. What am I doing?
Yeah, just
Rich-
alice-rich.com.
Perfect.
Or if you Google my name, I come up. Like a
Fantastic.
whole page of stuff, you know?
Cool. About the Thanksgiving weekend. I wish I could be there. It sounds
Yeah.
amazing.
And I'm enjoying following you, Leah, and seeing all these performers and music, and it's very exciting what you're
Yeah,
doing.
it's been really amazing to connect with so many people. And I'll also throw in a little plug for my flamenco show coming up. Fab Club is co-presenting La Forastera, which Alice, I don't know if you know about it, but this September 8th to 11th, I've been working on this show for like 3 years. It's going to be at the Factory Theater, and it's essentially like through film and documentary, through dance and live music and projections. It tells the story of an artist that's in love with a foreign art form and going living in a place and sort of trying to assimilate with a foreign craft. So that's what it's about. So me and flamenco. So it's going to be live streamed for those of you that are out of town. So Alice, I'll be sure to send you a link. You must watch.
I will watch. That
There's
sounds
even the
great.
basketball part, which I think you'll really enjoy.
I will. Good.
Well, this has been so wonderful. Thank you so much for
It's
joining us
been
on the
great.
first talk.
Well, thank
And
you for asking me. It's very lovely.
Pleasure.
I enjoyed myself immensely. Bye-bye, Leah.
Bye.
Bye.